Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Back in the day, if you wanted me to play on a session, you had to call my house, and like you said, it's the dial-up phone, and
Wow,
and my
man.
mom would book it. I'll tell you a funny story
Wow.
about that is Michael Jackson called the house once.
Wow.
And my mother is, she's a, your iconoclastic black mom. So phone rings. She said, "Hello? Yeah, hello. Is Paul there?" And she's like, "Who is this?"
Right.
"This is Michael." She's like, "Boy, quit playing on my phone." And hung up the phone.
Oh, man. Wow.
And
Wow.
fortunately, he called back.
Real quick, if you're new here, welcome to the TrevBeats Show. Make sure you subscribe if you want to stick around. And for the regulars, if you ever feel compelled to throw some extra support our way, check out the membership options next to the subscribe button. It's strictly for those who want to help us do more, but your viewership is support enough. Now back to the show.
TrevBeats Show, TrevBeats Show. TrevBeats Show, TrevBeats Show.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the TrevBeats Show. Now, normally, I go through a whole bunch of introductions and all that. I'm not even going to waste your time with that today because the guest speaks for themselves. I mean, I'm just going to say this. If you ever listen to the radio, I'm not even going to say in the last 30 years, 40 years, just if you've ever listened to the radio, you've heard my guest today. I'm talking about Thriller, Bad, Whitney Houston, Daft Punk. I mean, thousands of records in the DNA of music that you grew up on. So without further ado, my guest today is the incomparable, insurmountable, unbelievable Mr. Paul Jackson Jr. Paul.
Trevor, how you doing, man? How you doing?
Hey, man, listen, man, I am so happy to get you here, bro. I mean, wow, man, we've been friends my whole life, basically, but it's like, dude, I'm still such a huge fan. And yeah, we've worked together plenty of times, but what you've been able to accomplish, man, is unbelievable. So once again, thank you for pulling up to the TrevBeats Show, man. Thank you, man.
Well, it's funny, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, "I was young and now I'm old and I've never seen the righteous forsaken." And the funny thing is, like I work with Andrew Hay, the engineer, and I worked for years with his dad. I worked with Harvey Jr. I worked for years with his dad. And then I worked with you, and I worked for years with your dad. And it's like, okay, and that's just the goodness of God. No, I'm not calling myself an old head, although I am an old head. But it's just the goodness of God that I'm still doing stuff, still in the game, and still able to work with my buddies' kids. It's amazing to me. So anyway, to make a short answer long as I often do, I'm happy to be here.
No, man. Well, I'm happy to have you here. And it's funny you touched on that because I wanted to touch on that because I did hear stories from my dad that back in the day, he would be booking you for a session and he'd have to call your mom because you were like underage. So that means
yeah.
Right? I mean, dude, that's like, so you were doing sessions not even 18 years old, man. Like, tell us about that. When did that start, man? That's crazy.
It started actually, I was 18, 19 years old, and I was still living at my mom's house.
Gotcha.
And so you got to remember, this is before cell phones, before pagers, before services, before all of that.
Yeah.
So my service, my pager, my everything was Blanche Lucille Jackson.
That's right.
And she knew how to find me. It's like wherever I was. The funniest one was I was at the gym one day, and I'm doing something. I'm in the locker room, phone rings. "Yeah, is there a Paul, it's a page Paul Jackson Jr. I pick it up. "Yeah, it's your mom." It's, I pick it up. "Yeah, are you available for this session?" I was like, how did she find me at the gym? But that was the thing, is she always knew where I was. So you're absolutely right. Back in the day, if you wanted me to play on a session, you had to call my house. And like you said, it's the dial-up phone, and my mom would book it. I'll tell you a funny story about that is Michael Jackson called the house once.
Wow.
And my mother is, she's a, your iconoclastic black mom. So phone rings. She said, "Hello? Yeah, hello. Is Paul there?" And she's like, "Who is this?"
Right.
This is Michael. She's like, boy, quit playing on my phone, and hung up the phone.
Oh man. Wow. Wow.
And fortunately, he called back.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely true. To book me for a session, you had to call my mom.
Wow. Well, man, that's amazing. And so let's, I like to talk about the origins of people and how they come to be. So, obviously this is taking place in Los Angeles. I guess you would call it South Central. I mean, some people do, some people don't.
It was Westfield for Live.
So, coming up at that time period, which I assume was like the 70s, 80s, was it the 70s-ish?
Late 70s, early 80s, yes.
Yeah, so coming up at that time, what made you just decide, hey man, I want to really just do sessions? I mean, everybody, the glamour of the road, especially when you're young, it's glamorous and you get popular. Sessions are so behind the scenes, where you don't really get seen and you don't get a lot of shine. What made you want to go the session route?
Well, interesting story. When I really started focusing on music, all I knew is I wanted to be like the best guitar player in the world. And then I met, through Patrice Rushen, I met Ritenour. And I saw what Lee did. And it's like, okay, well, he's doing sessions. Then I was taking guitar lessons from an amazing guitar player named Greg Poree, who actually I just spent time with him.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about Greg is we ended up scoring the Martin show years later.
Sure.
But I was studying with Greg. I was his only student, and he was a session musician.
Right.
So I was learning firsthand. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's this thing called a studio musician where you go in and play records. Then, to top it all off, I met a guy by the name of Frank Wilson. Now, Frank Wilson was the one that wrote You Make Me So Very Happy. He wrote Keep On Truckin'. He wrote Son of Sagittarius. He wrote just song after song. And you remember the famous song by Lenny Williams that E40 sampled? Okay.
Of course.
That was the first record I played on.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So I was at USC studying. Yeah.
Hold on, man. Hold on. That's a bar, bro. Because that's a classic in itself. So you starting off with classics. But go ahead.
Right. So that was the first record I actually played on that got released. And I was doing demos for him and stuff like that before.
Wow.
But that's the first record I did that got released. And so I saw firsthand what a studio musician. Now, it gets even better. Show you how God works. So I got saved and I started going to this church. I was going to church with drummer Ollie Brown.
Sure.
Who played with Stevie, produced, Breaking and all that.
Ain't no stopping us.
Ollie Brown. Right. Ollie Brown is best friends with none other than Ray Parker Jr.
Of course.
Okay. So I met Ray. And at that time, Ray started radio and he was having hits and stuff like that. So he stopped doing sessions. So what Ray started doing was there was a guitar player in his band, Charles Fearing.
Sure.
And Ray would get 2 sessions. He would send me on one session and send Charles on the next. So Ray'd get 4 sessions. He'd send me, Charles, Charles, me. So I started learning firsthand. I said, well, wait a minute. You come in, you make up some stuff, you make the song feel good, you come up with parts, and that's what a studio musician does. So I started learning firsthand because of recommendations and just people guiding my career what a studio musician was.
Yeah. Wow, man. So, it speaks to, first of all, shout out to, everybody you mentioned, I've known out throughout my life, but I want to go back to another, what I call breadcrumbs moment, because you mentioned that Greg Poree and you worked on the early beginning of Martin. And
yes.
So Greg and I've known Greg my whole life. Both of his sons, Emil and Justin, and I all went to school together. I gave Justin percussion lessons when he was a kid before Ozo Motley, and I played drums on that first demo of the first theme y'all did for Martin.
Wow.
I got the picture. Literally, I still have the picture from that day. And that was one of my days of like realizing that, I wanted to do sessions. I got a little picture. I had like 4 snare drums and I was like, yeah, I'm doing sessions, and it's like the small circleness of this thing. I try to tell the people, these interviews and you could put stuff together, man, and these backgrounds and stuff. No one operates by themselves, right? So
Nobody.
and you're here from LA and now are, I will say, pound for pound, the most recorded guitar player. The metrics, I don't care. In my world, you are. In most people's world, you are. So at the end of the day, it goes to show you that relationships and just, having the right energy in the studio and off court, you can have a long career in the music business, man. I mean, how long have you been professionally doing sessions now?
I've been doing sessions now literally for 48 years.
Wow.
And
man.
And you hit it dead on the head. Everything is relationships.
Yeah.
I even tell people sometimes I get a chance to preach, and I tell people that people don't go to hell because they do the wrong things. People don't go to they go to hell because they don't have the right relationship.
Right.
So so everything is about relationships. And it's funny because, like I said, Ray Parker recommended me, and I'm on a session one day with Joe Sample. And Joe Sample says, well, Ray has been playing for us. I want to see how you work in a different situation. So I ended up recording with the Crusaders. I ended up recording with Barry White. I ended up recording with Gene Page because of a recommendation from Ray. So I'm playing on Johnny Mathis records, when I'm 19 years old. And then I met Sonny Burke, and Sonny Burke's like, well, let me see how you work on this and work on that. So I ended up playing acoustic guitar on Cruisin', and I became, tight with Smokey, and everything was a relationship. Everything.
Wow. So that means that if you did Cruisin', you did that with Gatson then. Wow, man.
Gatson.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, man.
And then David T overdubbed the electric stuff at Motown at the studio.
Wow. Yep. Wow, man. That's
That's
amazing. I mean, and so many thousands in between. I know you and I just did a Smokey record last year, I believe, with Warren Campbell. And it's like we did some movie stuff back in the day. It's like, man, just you have been one of the fixtures of Los Angeles and the music scene. It's like, so, I mean, and for all my listeners that are not familiar, you'll be able to check out the link down in the bio, in the description, because I think you're going to be blown away. Now, the one record that we all know that we may not know, some people may not know you played on, but everybody knows the record is Thriller. So you did pretty much the majority of things with with Quincy Jones. So when did your relationship with Quincy start?
That relationship started in about 82. And he didn't call me to work on Michael's record. The first thing I did with him was a record for James Ingram called It's Your Night. And so that was between Off the Wall and Thriller. And so he says, I want to see, so he called me to work on the Thriller record. And then, actually, and then Bad, and then stuff for Patty, and more stuff for James, and The Color Purple, and then just a litany of things that he ended up doing. I ended up working with Quincy. In fact, I worked with him really right up until the time that he stopped being in the studio. He did there was a documentary, I played on that, in fact, and then he went in to re-record a lot of masters. I did those for him. And so, I it started in like 82, and it went on for years.
Wow, man. So that brings you to, let's say at a certain point, so you do get the call for Thriller, right? So that's like, we're all now re-enamored with all that time period because that movie just brings back the nostalgia of how immensely huge that period was of stardom. I don't think we've seen anything resembling that level of stardom since then. And all of those parts, ladies and gentlemen, you got to go back now. All of those parts that you are so in love with and you've been hearing your whole life is this man right here on guitar. That, to me, is just so amazing that you can take an instrument that you learn how to play and you decided you wanted to do this, go in the studio one day, and it becomes the soundtrack of generations of lives. It's such a power. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, how, when you're in that room with the Quincy, and that was happening, what was the energy when that was happening? How did it feel like, oh, this is about to be something special? Like, how was that, man?
Well, the cool thing is, okay, first of all, I think Off the Wall had sold like 8 million records or something crazy. So you knew, right. So you knew going in, it's like, okay, we know this is going to be a hit.
Right.
We just don't know how big of a hit. Nobody knew, 40 million didn't end up being 80 million records. Nobody knew that back then,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
But the cool thing about Quincy was Quincy would let you go for stuff. And then he would steer it. Like when like I was in the studio doing the guitars to P.Y.T.
Yeah.
So it was Quincy, it was Bruce, Matt Forger, the second engineer, and it was me.
Wow.
So he said, just create, just play. So and I'll talk about this later because I have an app now out called This Is How I Did It. And I revisit all those songs. And the first one I did is P.Y.T. because that's the one that everybody asked me about the most.
Right.
So so I sat in there and came up with stuff, play. And the funny thing is the first part I played, actually the second part I played ended up being the majority of the record. But I just played and played and played and played. And one thing that happened was in the bridge, pretty young thing, you make me sing, Jenna, all that stuff. Okay. So I brought it in, and then in the vamp, I dropped it out, and Quincy said, no. So once you bring that sound in, you got to keep it in because it's big. It takes the record to another level. So he just let me create, gave me a bunch of tracks. I think it's like 7 tracks of guitar or something like that.
Yeah.
And he just let me create. And that was the thing about Quincy is he would let you go unless he heard something specific. I remember the record, How Do You Keep the Music Playing? It was a duet between Patty and James.
Yeah.
And we're in the studio
Patty
doing
Austin.
it. And Patty Austin, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And James Ingram and Patty Austin. And I remember we're playing and he just, let it go and playing around David Foster's keyboard parts and things like that. I'll tell you one funny thing about that. If you listen to the record, there's a drum fill, big drum fill that Ndugu Chancellor does going into the bridge. And so we're playing and I'm sitting next to him, kind of, close to him. And so he goes, blap, boom, boom, do doom, crashes the cymbal and grabs it, chokes it.
Oh, wow.
I was freaked out. I messed up. I was like, did he just grab the cymbal and not miss the backbeat? If you listen to the record, you will hear it. Yes.
Oh, man.
And it made the record because
man.
Quincy, so, and that was the thing that Quincy, also the thing that he would say is that you got to catch people within 10 seconds. And back then everything was radio. I mean, and it's still true because people have a really short attention span. So if you don't catch people within 10 seconds, back then they changed the station. Now they'll go to something else streaming. They'll go to something else. They'll go to something else. So you need to catch people in 10 seconds or less.
Man. Yeah, that's
and so he had the thing about ear candy. So even with P.Y.T, the first licks, hopefully that'll keep you listening. And that's the thing.
Right.
Do things. And that was actually 2 different guitar parts. It was the first ding was guitar 2, and then was actually guitar 1. And so he would take things and he knew how to, he and Bruce knew how to, so working with Quincy was just amazing.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. And especially, man, that breakdown, the la 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 la. I mean, y'all listen to that. I mean, that guitar playing is epic. The funkiness of that guitar playing makes that whole section, y'all. So, man, dude, Paul, I mean, listen.
He just let me create,
It's just amazing to think because, just because the movie's like the biggest thing in the world right now. So it's just fresh. And, anyone that has a part of that is just becoming, rediscovered by another generation. So a lot of people will now put that together and are going to understand the significance of a lot of the musical contribution that you've done. So Herbie said, you're the guitar player that could play anything. And so, so when, as far as like the science of the groove, when you get caught into a session cold, like, talk about if somebody's calling you for a session cold, I mean, I kind of know because I've seen it, but somebody's calling you for a session cold, what's the gear going to get dropped off and what's the mental process for finding exactly what they need if it's a cold call?
Well, if it's a cold call, the gear that's going to be dropped off is various electric record guitars, Strat style guitar, a Les Paul style guitar, a hollow body guitar. Like for instance, on Late in My Life, that was actually a 335 that I play the octaves, with my thumb, West
Sure.
Montgomery style.
Sure.
So it'll be a hollow body guitar. Then it'll be a few different amps, a bunch of different pedals, a bunch of different effects. And so because you don't, like what I believe it was the Reverend Dr. Sugar Free under the auspices of Elder DJ Quick that said, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. So
yeah, come on.
I remember, man, the lyric that I like from that song is like, he said, Sugar Free said, and he did it, and he spit it so cold, he said something like, you got a $500,000 car, and they got no house. And I was like, yes. Oh,
Come
man,
on,
when he
man.
said that, when he spit that, I was like, man. I said,
yeah, man.
But so the thing is to be ready for whatever they may say, in the direction that anyone may go. The other thing is to be able to read music, because some people, they're better at writing it out than they are explaining it. Some people are better at explaining it, and some people are better at explaining it. The key thing is to also listen, because you want to listen to what the drummer's doing, what the bass player's doing, what the keyboard player's doing. You especially want to listen to what the vocal's doing and the lead instrument, saxophone, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like the first report card you get in kindergarten, plays well with others.
Yep.
And you get into the concept of space, you get into the concept of range, you get into the concept of rhythm, and you also the first rule over anything else is to make the music feel good. Whatever it is, I don't care what you're playing, make the music feel good. Straight ahead, country, western, polka, it's got to feel good.
Yeah, man.
And so that's the thing, is your ultimate goal is to make it feel good. So like I said, the concept of space, the idea of range. Also, think like a drummer. Now, I'm not trying to flatter you. That didn't come from me. That didn't come from me. That came from Freddie Green, who played with Count Basie. Freddie Green made the statement that a guitar player should be a drummer that plays chords.
Oh, hence the Freddie Green notes.
And if you ever listen to Count Basie records, everybody except Freddie and the bass player are going places. Drummer, bop, 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 Freddie's
yep.
Him and the bass. That's what the time is. And from what I understand is when the band would get a new drummer, Freddie's the one that broke him in. And then you consider people like Al McKay from Earth, Wind and Fire. He started out as a drummer. Yeah, he started as a drummer.
Yeah.
Ray Parker Jr. used to play drums in all his early songs. So
wow.
And when I was teaching at SC, I would tell the guitar players, you're a drummer. What you have to figure out is which drum you are. So if you're the hi-hat, you might be playing shing it ding it ding it ding it ding it. If you're the snare, you might be playing backwards. Jack, jack, jack. So the idea is you got to figure out which drum you are.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I talk. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I talk about that in the app is figuring out which drum you are. So that's a big part of it is and listening. The other thing, it's a bunch of little things, is that the drummer is always right. I don't care where he puts it. Your responsibility is to figure out where he puts it and put it there.
Got it.
And so working with different drummers, and all of them, there are a lot of great drummers, but everybody has their own clock. Everybody has their own feel. Everybody puts it a little bit differently, which is fine because that's music. That's personality. Your responsibility or my responsibility is to figure out where they're putting it, and I put it the same place.
Yeah, I mean, and all my guitar players, notice he didn't say play the fills ever. He didn't say that part of drums. Just play all over the place and all over everything. It's know your place and match the drummer in the tactful musical way. Not the fill way. But I mean, that concept is amazing because it makes so much sense because throughout history, you do hear, we had a lot of backbeat stuff going at one point in the Motown days and a lot of other days. And then you do have the rhythm stuff, which makes sense about the hi-hat. I mean, bro, that's an amazing analogy. That's unbelievable. So talking about evolution of the industry, but other than that, before we get to that, I remember doing a session with you. Now it's probably been close to 10 years, and you were the first person I saw to have a Kemper. And that was like, well, I think it was like The Big Short or something that we did. It was like a movie thing, and you had a Kemper, and I had never seen that before. Is that something, as opposed to actual amps in the old school way, which I know you have and all that, and I'm sure you bring on certain occasions, but is that something that you still use or sometimes, or what?
Well, I use different iterations of the same thing. Like right now I use a thing called a Fender Tone Master Pro.
Okay.
Which is the same concept, which is amps in a box, modeling the whole 9 yards. And then I use some tube pedals to give it some more warmth and more realism. I also use a pedal board. There's a great pedal board built for me, and there's a story behind it, by a company called Ike's Pedal Boards. So I use that in conjunction with a thing called a P.Y.T GPDI, which is a little tiny tube amplifier, but it's made to go direct. So one of the things you can't be afraid of is technology.
Yeah.
And I tell people, when you stop learning, when you stop grinding, you should just quit, because you're not going to get any better.
Yep.
So the idea of the Kemper, the Axe Effects, the Tone Master Pro, though the idea is, and you've worked with lots of these artists, and you produce a lot of these artists, if you'll notice, there began a shift away from having a bunch of stuff on stage. First we went to like the in-ear monitors. That's the first thing we did, is we went to those.
Yep.
So we got rid of monitors on stage. Then people realized, I don't want a bunch of big blaring guitar amplifiers on stage. So people would actually put the speakers below the stage or behind the stage. And it's like, then it's like, okay, well, I don't want to hear them at all. So the responsibility, hey, that's okay. If you're singing and dancing, you may not want to hear big, gigantic power chords.
Right.
So the concept, how can we have a quiet stage? So I began to investigate what's the best way to get a great sound and not make a bunch of noise. And the other thing about the advent of these pieces of gear, like the Tone Master Pro and the Kemper and things, is the sound is repeatable. It's replicable. So if you did a show in upstate New York, and then your next show is in San Diego,
right?
Different sound company, different stage, different everything. If you had backline amps or whatever, that'd be a different day, different microphones, different weather, different whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're using something like a Kemper or Tone Master Pro, that kind of thing, your sound is exactly the same.
The consistency. Yeah.
And then one of the things I used to do is, we were doing American Idol, and I used the Kemper, and I bought a second one that we kept at Ricky Minor's recording studio. So what we would do is, we would do a recording, I would save the sounds, and then I'd take them to the stage. So on the stage, we'd have exactly the same sounds that we had on the recording.
Oh yeah, that's
so
awesome.
The sounds are repeatable and replicable, exactly. So those are the, one thing is, you can't be afraid of technology.
Yeah, so that's true. And that leads me to my next topic, which is next couple, right? Which is, tape machines and, the old school way. You've seen that go down to the DAW-based way, and then a lot of remote tracking. So over the years, like, what would you say the percentage is that you're now doing remote stuff, versus when you used to go out and do all the sessions? Like, how much of that what you're doing is remote now, you say?
Now I would say it's somewhere between 90 and 95% remote.
Wow.
And the deal, in fact, it's funny. I'm in this group, Jazz Funk Soul, with Jeff Lorber and Everett Harp. Well, Everett lives in Phoenix. So,
right.
If he writes a song, Jeff and I live here, but if he writes a song, it's like, hey, Paul, can you lace this track for me? So he'll send me the track, send me the files, put a bunch of parts on it, send it. And see, the other thing too is, you mentioned before, having all my gear brought to the studio. Well, there's the price of bringing it, there's the setup time, there's the miking, there's the, getting the sounds, versus me having all my equipment at home set up, ready to go.
Right.
So, Trevor, you send me a track, it's like, Paul, can you lace this for me? I turn on a couple of switches and I'm recording.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because everything's already wired, already ready to go. I got a bunch of amps, bunch of guitars, bunch of everything, junk. I got stuff, and it's all here. So, so you just, and the funny thing, you'd mentioned that, is I had a conversation with my wife, because I have a room that's big enough to track in, and I'd done drums in there a couple of times. And so, but it was only a couple of times. And she's like, well, how much do you actually use it? I said, well, not much. And then you realize that most drummers, including yourself, have setups of their own.
Right.
So it's like, okay, why do I need this? I said, if I want to do a session with Trevor, I make that long drive to the valley. I'm being funny, folks. I send you the files, make the long drive to the valley. I sit there, you do a few passes, and then we go out for lunch, as opposed to, trying to do it here or booking booking a studio or whatever. So that's the other thing, is that, it's become a situation where, or even if I wanted to track with you, this is gold, is I bring my Kemper, my Tone Master Pro, we plug it up together in your room, and we're sitting there in your studio,
right.
Everything going direct, except for the drums, and we're tracking live, but it's just you and me.
And there's no bleed,
and there's no bleed. And so the advent of technology has enabled us to do a lot of things we couldn't do before. My buddy used to make fun of me because I had a tape machine, and to punch in, I would put the remote on the floor, and I took one of the rubber feet off of a power amp and put it on the record button. And so I'd play along, and when I had to punch in, I'd raise my foot up and I'd hit the switch.
Yo, that's wild, bro.
So fortunately now I don't have to do that. Now we have auto punch, so I don't have to do that. So
auto punch,
that's a good thing.
Pretty soon, I mean, you could probably, I'm sure you can configure now to just, verbally, it's all, and that leads me to the next part of the evolution, which is, in some people's mind, a dirty little word, and some people's mind is just a natural progression. And of course, that's AI. I'd like to get your take on it, both in a musical way. What do you think about it in the musical setting, but also, do you use it in your non-musical life, doing other tasks and other things? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. Well, I use AI a lot for search engine kind of stuff.
Okay.
I've been on this health kick, so I've been researching, a lot of supplements, what different exercises do, what different supplements do, so I use it a lot for that. And then in terms of musical things, and I do this for my students when I was at SC. If I was trying to teach a certain song, what I would do is I would, let's say it was a guitar player. Well, I put it in there's a program called Moises that you know about, and I take the guitars out.
Yeah.
Or if it's a vocal thing, I take the voices out. It's like, okay, you replace it, but they could play with the actual track, because I actually did a thing where I was able to separate the stems.
Yeah.
Each stems, for those of you that don't know, stems are individual tracks of instruments. So I was able to separate the stems and take things out. So, and it gets back to what I said about technology. You have to embrace technology. But I remember my dad used to work. Yeah, I remember my dad used to work with computers, and he had a saying. They had a saying back then when computers first came in. The saying was garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So, AI, artificial intelligence, obviously the manipulation of data and the is a lot more advanced, but I'm of the ilk is that you can't make a silk's purse out of a sow's ear.
Right.
You still have to give it the right information, the right input. And if you give it great input, AI comes up with some amazing things.
Yeah.
But the idea is you have to give it some type of input. And the better the input, the better the outcome. So, you have to embrace technology. You can't get away from it. Will I use it to write songs? Absolutely not.
Right.
But will I use it to enhance songs? Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. Speaking of garbage in, garbage out, and just input, let's talk about another kind of input, which is mentorship. And it's like you mentioned Ray Parker, did a lot for you. Also, Patrice Rushen was one of the mentors, and then you ended up yourself with Patrice mentoring thousands of students, because you were at USC for a long time. So
8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. How important is mentorship in today's music scene? Because it seems like the proving ground part is almost gone. As far as going to clubs and all, that's going away. As opposed to making your rounds through a city. And kind of coming up the ranks. That's kind of starting to be outweighed. So how do you feel about mentorship to the next generation?
Mentorship is extremely important for a lot of reasons. I heard the minister Miles Monroe say, you don't want your brilliance or what God is giving you to go in the grave with you. So the fact of the matter is that you've got to leave some knowledge. I play at church at Faithful Central, and there's a young guitarist by the name of Chris McCorkle who's dope. And it's funny, every time he sees me, he calls me the legend. And I'm like, dude, did he just call me old? I think he did. I think that's a nice way of just saying old head, but that's okay. but we talk about sound. We talk about approaches. We listen to each other. I'll ask him, what did he play? He'll ask me, what did I play? And then we're actually going to get together in a couple of weeks because he said, I want to come over and talk about sound. So my thing is, the Lord has allowed me to get to a certain level. I mean, I tell people I played on the number one record in the world 35 years apart. That's got to be God. The first one being Thriller, the second one being Random Access Memory by Daft Punk.
Wow.
I mean, Lord has, gifted me with a lot of things, and it would be a tragedy, and I would virtually say a sin to not share knowledge with people and give people your phone number, give people your email address, or be accessible to people. They want to ask you some questions or just know some stuff. That would be criminal.
Yeah.
So it's vitally important. And that's how I approached SC. I remember my wife used to make fun of me because I was always buying boxes. And let me explain. So we talked about quiet stage and not having great sound without making a lot of noise. Okay, so there are a variety of ways of doing it, and my thing was, you may not like the Kemper, you may not like the Helix by Line 6, but there are other ways of doing it. You may like pedals. Let's figure out the way to do it that way. You may want an all-in-one multi-effects. Let's figure that out. So I was always bringing stuff into the office, boxes of this and try that, because, they had amplifiers, but what is it that they don't have? And what can I show you that you can take from here and hit the ground running?
Yeah.
So so that was a big part of it. And then, bringing in, like whenever I would do a show, like I did the Oscars for 5 years with Ricky Minor.
Right.
So I would bring the charts in from the Oscars.
Oh, that's
and it's
dope.
like, okay, guess what we're going to do today? You're going to play the opening theme from the Oscars. And I would have a track of it, and I'd break out the music. Okay, there's a sound change here. There's a patch change here. You go to rhythm here. There's a lead thing. Okay, these are parameters. Okay, go. Or I would bring in tracks like we did a Christmas special once, and Tori Kelly sang This Christmas, the Donny Hathaway song. And the original didn't have a lot of guitar on it, so I had to make some stuff up. So I brought the track in. I said, okay, guys, you got 45 minutes to come up with a guitar part on this. Here's the chart. Here's the track. I'll be your engineer. I'll rewind. I'll fast forward, whatever you want. But you got 45 minutes to come up with a guitar part. Because real world is you're going to go in a session with somebody and they're going to say, okay, great. You got 45 minutes to come up with a guitar part.
Yep.
Man. And so that kind of mentorship is vitally important. And, as long as the Lord gives me breath, I'm going to continue to do it.
Yeah, well, and that right there to me shows why in a music school situation, I don't see how you can have instructors, and I know people are going to get upset. Some will. Doesn't bother me because it's the facts. In this particular area of study, which is music, especially popular music, it is impossible to have someone be taught by someone who has never done it on any real level. So I don't understand how we keep seeing this perpetuating all over the world in these different schools that people are paying money for, and they're getting instructed by people that have only gone to school to be instructors, not actually done the thing. So when I see someone like you who is absolutely hands down the king of sessions as far as I'm concerned right now that's living, that information is going to carry so much more than someone who read about you trying to teach somebody secondhand, and that goes for any instrument. I mean, USC was really smart for a period in having you and Dougal Chancellor, Patrice Rushen,
Freddie Washington.
So many people that
Reggie Hamilton.
That did it and are doing it. That's to me how you learn how to really make it, because what happens most of the time, these people go to music school, they come out of school and say, well, what am I supposed to do now? And end up going back to school to be teachers. They never even got to do the music thing that they spent all that money for, because they didn't really learn the proper stuff. So
Right.
Paul, you as a mentor, man, I mean, and I don't know if I told you this, my daughter plays guitar and she's killing.
Oh, nice.
And
no, you did not tell me.
And I'll send you something of hers after, but I'd love for her to be able to sit with you just for
bring her over to the house, man.
Yeah, come on, for sure. But listen, man, let's we're gonna wrap up. I know we could stay here for hours. I don't really want to wrap up right this moment, but we're gonna head towards that. So we'll see where the Lord takes us, right? But as far as legacy goes, looking back at the discography of well over 1,000 recordings, is there just one part or rhythm or whatever that is like your personal favorite?
I think if you had to talk about one part, it would probably be P.Y.T.
Gotcha.
If I had to pick one, because that was a situation where I sat there and it's like, come up with something now. And it's also the song that most people ask me about is P.Y.T. So that would probably be, if there was one, it would be that. Record wise, obviously Thriller. There was a record I did with Ella Fitzgerald when I was 19 years old. That would be another one. Obviously Random Access Memories. Probably what I played on the Weeknd song, I Feel It Coming, would be one, because it was such a huge record.
Wait a second, man. I didn't even know that, Paul. Come on, bro.
Okay.
Come on, man.
Okay.
Come on, man. Come
Okay.
on, man. Come on, man. You're killing me, bro.
Okay. But true story. So I'm in the studio with Daft Punk. This is after Random Access Memories, and we're recording for a day, coming up with stuff. And it never came out. So I'm not worried about it. So I'm driving down the street one day. I was in Culver City. I remember exactly where I was. And I hear this record by The Weeknd. It comes on. I said, oh, man, that sounds pretty good. I said, man, the guitar sounds pretty good. I said, wait a minute, that's me. And then I realized that it was a collab between The Weeknd and Daft Punk. And it's like, so one of the songs we cut that day turned into I Feel It Coming.
Got you. That's hilarious,
so
man. Hilarious.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, so those would be some. I'm trying to think what else. The guitar solo on This Place Hotel, Heartbreak Hotel.
Oh, man.
For Michael. And the reason is because he sang it to me.
Wow.
I go in the studio and he puts in a cassette. Okay, once again, flashback. For those of you that don't know what a cassette is, we used to have these little machines that had a box with tape in it that was about this big. It was a cassette. And you stuck it in a cassette player and out would come music. It was the forerunner to CDs. Before that, we had 8-tracks. I'm not talking about 8-tracks. Right. But, so he had sung this on a cassette and said, I want you to play this. And so I played exactly what he sang. So things like that ended up being iconic, were really special to me. Also, the first solo record I did, which was called I Came to Play, because it got nominated for a Grammy, and I was able to take my parents to the Grammys.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
And so that was a big one. So those might be, some of them. Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk about that, because you did, quite a not too recently, but a while ago, you did start putting out records and start your journey as a, frontman, as an artist. So how has that been? I know sessions never stopped and everything, but what was that transition like, just deciding that you wanted to step out in front and starting to put all that together? I mean, how was that?
Well, it's interesting how that happened. Is I had bought some recording equipment and I was cutting all these demos because I was convinced that you needed a band. And one day, and I believe it was the Lord, he said, you need to make some jazz. You need to make some instrumental music. And I said, I can't do that. I don't play like Earl Klugh or George Benson. I said, okay, I'll leave it alone. So I was producing a sax player, and I came up with this tune, I Came to Play. And the song ended up falling into my hands. So I'd done all the demos on guitar, played it for Sylvia Ronan and Atlantic Records, and that ended up being I Came to Play, which was my first solo record. and the one that got nominated for a Grammy. So it's still going on. Like I said, I'm in a group with Jeff Lorber and Everett Harp, Jazz Funk Soul. We just released a record, Simpatico, had a top 5 single that I wrote with Jeff. And so we're touring. So I'm still doing solo records, still putting out music, still grinding. In the words of the Reverend Dr. Rick Ross, every day I'm hustling, so it never really stops,
Yeah, man.
and you just, you keep it going. So so doing that, I'm going to come out with new solo music this year. And so you just, keep it going. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of places to be creative and a lot of ways to get better. So I just, try to keep it going,
Well, man, you're definitely keeping it going, man. It's like Paul, just an iconic career, man. It's such an amazing story, and just like to see the fact, first of all, the fact that you've been in LA this whole time and kind of, born and raised and made your career here and, still here is amazing, and it speaks to the fabric of, Los Angeles, especially at a certain time. I mean, so many people came out of it, you know what I mean? And amazing things, man. But Paul, I can't thank you enough, man, for sitting with us here. And, everybody out there, I'll help you, but go look up the discography. I'm going to help you in the description, but you're going to be mind blown.
Well, one thing I got to do a shameless plug here.
Yes, sir.
So it's along the lines of leaving a legacy. So myself and a filmmaker by the name of Keith O'Derrick decided to do a video series. It's called Paul Jackson Jr.'s This Is How I Did It. There's a link on my website, I think a link on Instagram, and where I revisit songs that I did. So the first unit is Michael Jackson's songs. So I did P.Y.T, Heartbreak Hotel, Another Part of Me, and I'm getting ready to upload Dirty Diana and also Love Never Felt Like This. Because I play guitar on that as well. And on the app, I break the parts down, why I played the songs. There's charts on there. There's tracks to practice the whole shot. So that's Paul Jackson Jr.'s This Is How I Did It. So, and the idea was to once again leave a legacy where if somebody says, well, what is it? What did you do and how did you do it? There'll be a tangible way that they can get it. So,
man, that's amazing, man. And you said it's a web app or is it an iOS app?
It's a web app. It's on the Udemy platform. And like I said, if you go on my website, pauljacksonjr.net, and click on the link, it'll take you right to it.
We got to give it up again for Mr. Paul Jackson Jr., man. One of the greatest to ever do it. And Paul, man, once again, thank you for being so gracious to sit and talk with us. It's very inspiring to hear your story, and hopefully it's going to touch a lot of people, man. So we will talk again soon, my brother. And we got to go to the range. I got to get you out to the range.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Because we won't mention what we got, but yes, we do have to go.
Yes, sir.
And didn't you tell me you were an instructor?
Yeah, I'm a firearms instructor, certified, and a chief range safety officer. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we got some stuff to.
Yeah, come on, man. You know what? I did all that so our musician community could be a little bit more well versed in that whole world. You know what I'm saying? So
it's nothing. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to and it is a skill and a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took our brother out. I took Philly games out already. Yeah, it's fun as hell. Yeah, so
it's fun,
All right, yeah, man. So cool. Well, thank you, Paul, man, and I will talk to you again. And ladies and gentlemen, on the TrevBeats Show, Mr. Paul Jackson Jr.
Well, Lord bless you real good and stay funky, like I always say.
All right, bro.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. I appreciate you for rocking with us. Share this episode with somebody in your circle who's on their musical journey, and you never know who needs this conversation. So subscribe, like, and comment. Follow us on Instagram, Trevor Lawrence Jr., and stay locked in. The TrevBeats Show, new episodes every week. All right, we out.
It's the TrevBeats Show. It's your TrevBeats Show.
It's the TrevBeats Show and we out. We out. It's the TrevBeats Show and we out. It's the TrevBeats.